Now that my good girl training had failed, I don't do anything lightly. I am not the type of person that can say, oh, I will do this thing for 7 days or 30 days or whatever number of days. I will come up with a million completely justified reasons to not complete said challenge. I am an all in or all out type of gal. So as the days grew between me and that sobriety tracker, I began to twitch. I knew in my gut that I would never be able to do something like this if I told myself, oh, I'll just stop drinking for 30 days, as tons of people do at various points of the year in normal society. I knew with absolute certainty that this had to be a lifestyle change or it would never work for me. It was that same knowing inside of me that told me I had broken the code I had with myself. Incredibly confused, embarrassed, and uncomfortable, I decided that this was a totally logical step in my fitness journey. It was no secret to anyone that I was dedicated to getting my sexy on and addicted to my weight training practice. Having plateaued a little, I decided that cutting alcohol was the next logical step. As I had been very public on social media about the successes of my fitness journey, I began to share about cutting alcohol out of my diet as the next phase of my commitment. I began receiving shock and kudos from all sides of the internet and my personal life. I continued with my simple life in Tucson, open the restaurant, work all day, close up, and head to the gym. Except that now I had to find the willpower to drive straight home instead of to the store for my bottles of wine. Every night after the gym, I would sit in my car, unable to turn over the ignition. I would sit there in the dark under the one parking lot light and pull out my phone. I would share on social media how kick-ass my workout was, alongside my sweaty selfie, and then muster up the courage to convince myself this not drinking thing was a good idea. It was almost as if posting about it on the internet made it real enough that I had to maintain the image. As the vanity metrics began to roll in, validating the post I had just made, I would gather the courage to drive home. Even while the internet and the smoking hot guys I was seeing completely validated my physical appearance, I couldn't help but notice a deeply rooted feeling of shame and disappointment within myself. So I would turn on my car, roll down the windows, crank up the jams, and tell myself, tomorrow, I will set another PR in the gym. I carried on this way every day, constantly ignoring the embarrassment and shame I felt inside, while continuously throwing myself into work and the gym. The physical results were obvious, so it was easy to justify my new lifestyle. By the grace of something holy that I didn't understand, I happened to open my sobriety tracker one day to see that it had been exactly 30 days since my last drink. It was a self-justification that poured into my mind at that moment, saying I had earned a celebratory case of wine, which made something crystal fucking clear. I had a drinking problem. It had taken every single one of those 30 days of lying to myself and others before I could see myself clearly. I was an alcoholic. At that moment, I knew that that was the God-honest truth, and I told no one. One Saturday night, some of my mom's friends came into the restaurant for dinner. They were dressed to the nines in their Western gear. Fully equipped with their bedazzled belts and fancy boots, they came in for the pregame before heading to the country bar next door. I knew that Saturday nights were poppin' over there because our parking lot would be full the second our dinner rush was over. I was no stranger to serving a slice and a beer to a dapper man in a cowboy hat, but I had never gone dancing there. My mom's friends were professionally trained dancers in all forms, and somehow convinced me to join them after work and said they would teach me how to country dance. Willing to try anything that would keep me from sitting alone in my apartment at night, I agreed. I prayed those few drunken lessons in the living room with my bestie in Phoenix would come back to me. I got off work that night, threw on some jeans and my fake boots, and headed over to the bar. Holy moly. From the moment I stepped onto that dance floor, I fell in love. Country dancing is sexy, high energy, and exhilarating. Plus, have you seen a fine-ass cowboy who can dance? I mean, come on, what's a girl to do? The only thing sexier than a cowboy who can dance is Channing Tatum in those sweatpants grinding on his workbench, but it would still be a few years before I met my Channing Tatum look-alike boyfriend. This bar was country heaven, and Mama was hooked. I love me a man who can dance. Joining this Saturday night dance crew quickly became a regularly scheduled activity for me. I was on a first-name basis with the owner, a regular to all the bouncers, and had no time to worry about not drinking while I was dancing my heart out into the wee hours of the morning. I would go home completely exhausted and on cloud nine. Life was good. It didn't take long before the old men that I loved to dance with, the burly bouncer, and my regular Saturday night dance parties quickly became nice distractions from all of those feelings still trying to bubble up inside of me. I was fit, active, hot, and socializing without alcohol. My mental health was fine until it wasn't. While my extracurricular activities kept me plenty distracted after hours, things at the restaurant were getting rocky. It had now been months since my dad's episode, and while he desperately wanted to return to working in the restaurant, it was obvious to me that he was not okay. He would come into the shop and just mosey around. He would open the freezer, tinker on the computers, but wouldn't do anything. He just wanted to be around. I wanted him to be around, but he just started doing weird stuff. He would go stand in the walk-in and just look around. He would walk away any time the phone rang instead of answering it, and he refused to make eye contact with customers wanting to see how he was doing. Folks would get so excited to see he was there, shout his name, and he would turn on his heels and walk out the back door. He seemed to be in such a dark funk from the heart attack, feeling like he had no purpose, being an alpha male watching his 20-something-year-old daughter save and run his business. He was not his normal self. He was grouchy, bitter, and kind of mean. He was not the man I knew and loved, my best friend or my ride or die. I don't know who that person was. He was lost and broken, and it broke my heart into a million pieces. Then he started coming in and barking orders at the staff, many of whom had been hired by me and had never worked with him. He would scream at them to do something that was polar opposite of the procedures I had been operating with for months. The staff would be confused and not know who to listen to, or if what they were doing was right. I would assure them that he would be going home soon and ask them to get back to their work. That would just kindle his fire, and he would turn his attention toward me. It was like he had developed a new hobby of trying to pick fights with me. My dad and I had never so much as argued, yet now we were constantly fighting. It broke my heart to hear the berating things he said to me, but I knew I had to maintain composure in front of my team. In the middle of his tirade, I would walk him out the back door so the attention was all on me and not on the staff. Then he would storm off in his car after not getting a reaction out of me and peel out of his parking spot. Watching him leave, I would crumble to the ground. I was heartbroken and our relationship was in shambles. I could not believe how hard he was taking this cardiac recovery. As the fights grew more frequent and my heart continued to shatter, he was also starting to make the team uncomfortable. I eventually had to ban him from coming into the restaurant. This was the longest he had ever been out of work, but my role was to keep the ship afloat, so I did what I felt I had to do. It almost broke us. My desperation to repair my good girl training told me that no matter what I felt, it was my responsibility to lock it up and keep the family business alive. No matter the cost, no matter the consequences, I would not let it fail. I would not fail again. Eventually, as the desert fall gained a crisp chill in the air, some folks who love me sat me down for what appeared to be a come to Jesus moment. They lovingly expressed their concerns over my well-being and mental health. My mental health? I haven't had a drink in months, I thought. Didn't they know I was invincible? I put on my good girl mask and carried on. I refused to give in or show any weakness. But deep inside, their words shattered my heart even more. They were right. Every week that passed, I grew more uncomfortable, and with each passing week, I poured myself deeper into the restaurant. More gym sessions were being replaced with nights out dancing at the country bar, and my after-hour bliss was now being filled with hollow sex with a man I knew I'd never keep. Those simple weeks turned into repetitively numb months until one day in early spring, I had another deep knowing. This time, it told me that as long as I stayed in Tucson, my dad would never be able to make it back to the restaurant. I knew this was a rip-off the Band-Aid type of situation. I had to completely remove myself and force his hand, or he would never get better. He would either sink or swim, and that thought was fucking brutal. This went against everything my good girl training had taught me. However, I felt like I was slowly dying inside and had to give it a chance. Plus, I still hadn't told anyone how challenging things had gotten for me. On the day I called my dad and gave him my 1 week's notice, I told him Friday would be my last day working at the restaurant, and that I would be gone by midweek the following week. I hung up the phone before he could even respond. Then, melting past the edge of my couch onto the living room floor, I cried for the first time in over a year, and I made it count. That following Wednesday, I moved to Los Angeles. I drove away knowing that at any moment it could all go up in flames, but I couldn't carry that responsibility any longer. I had to get out of there. Driving out of town that day was one of the hardest things I'd ever done. Arriving in Santa Monica, I bunked up at my aunt and uncle's house and found a job almost instantly. I was hired as the director of marketing for a private personal training company. The owner had outgrown his ability to grow the business himself, and my business savviness was just what he needed to organize and scale his business. I found myself able to train for free in gorgeous West Side gyms, and the clients began rolling in. It was all working out. It was all working so well that the owner of the company started spending more time away, frequenting Las Vegas, partying, and participating in quite lavish dates in Malibu. This was proof that I was doing a great job. My good girl training had been reinstated. That was until my paycheck started bouncing. He was spending the money faster than I could bring it in. Without a paycheck in LA for 7 weeks, I was beyond desperate. Anyone who has ever lived in Los Angeles can attest to the fact that it is not cheap. Unwilling to see his faults, I couldn't fight with him any longer. I had to find another job, and going back to Tucson was not an option. On a Sunday evening, while sitting on my bed, I came across the most generic job posting on the internet. It read something along the lines of, "Receptionist needed, must be able to start immediately. Sold." Desperate to make it work in LA, I applied for the job and received a note back that very same night and had an interview set for the following morning.